All right, let's talk about the angle of your paper on the table and really the angle of your paper relative to the angle of your arm, okay? So you can see my arm is here. It's on this angle. And really the paper right now is, you can say it's on the same angle as the arm. Or you could say the bottom of the paper down here is perpendicular to my arm, okay? So I guess we could consider this a completely neutral angle for writing. And you'll see different angles recommended in different books, in the different, in the old business penmanship books. Some of them will mention something like this, and other books will mention that or suggest that you turn the page a little bit this way, so that now you have this kind of open angle here. Instead of a 90-degree angle like this, create a little bit of an open angle. And this is something you should experiment with yourself to really see how it feels to have different angles. Even try turning the paper the other way. And if you're a left-hander, this is going to vary and be a lot different for you. You definitely need to do a lot of experimentation to figure out what works for you. But here's what I've found in my experimentation. So the best thing about having a neutral or a perpendicular angle between the paper and my arm is that really gives me a lot of range of motion to go across the page, which makes sense because if I'm writing across a page, I can go the furthest when my arm is hinging in the same direction, okay? So you can see, like, it's just, if I just make the natural angle of my arm and the natural sweeping motion with my arm, you can see it's going in that direction of the lines of the paper. And you can see that if I were to, let's say, change the angle like this, now this sweeping direction is going up like this. It's not in line with the lines on the page, okay? So now when I write like this, my writing zone is really diminished. I'm starting to hit my limit here, whereas here I could easily go across the entire page, okay? So if I was writing for speed, for example, I would definitely keep a perpendicular angle, because that would allow me to write across the entire page without stopping, without having to move the paper or adjust anything to get across the page, and that would save me a lot of time. The problem with that is that creates a certain geometry that makes writing my best hand a little more difficult, okay? So for me, and for what I see with most people with arm writing and traditional American penmanship, the really difficult strokes to make are the ones that are the upstrokes and downstrokes, okay? So like an L, for example, something that goes up and down like this. And the reason that's harder, and if you follow my channel, you might already know why. The reason that's hard is because when you make strokes up and down like this on slant, it actually requires the usage of muscles in the upper arm and in the back and in your shoulder, muscles that are further away from the point of your pen, okay? And when you're trying to control something, it's always easier to control something when your control point is close to the thing you're trying to control, okay? That's why it's easier to write with your finger, or it's easier to control the pen very accurately with your fingers like this at small sizes, because you're controlling it with these muscles down here by the fingers, which are very close to the point of the pen, okay? Now compare this up-down motion like this, which uses really upper arm, shoulder, back muscles, with a side-to-side motion like this. Now this motion is really controlled by the elbow, the hinge in your elbow, the muscles in your upper arm as well, and even probably maybe some of the muscles in your forearm just below the elbow too. So now we're moving the point of control down closer to the point of the pen. We're still far away, which is why arm writing is so difficult, but we're moving it closer, and it's just a much easier, more controlled motion down here, okay? So now getting back to the angle of the paper, when you have this perpendicular configuration like I have here, bottom of the page is perpendicular to my arm, the connective strokes, the strokes that go to the right are very easy to make. But these upstrokes are a little more difficult because they really require a lot of that upper arm, shoulder control, those muscles to control that movement. That's because they're on this angle, which is not on the angle that our arm hinge is on. So our arm hinge is really going in this direction with some curve. And when we make these upstrokes and downstrokes, we're trying to go up and down in this direction. So it's a completely different direction. Now, what we can do to make those up and down strokes easier is to turn the page this way. So I'm rotating it clockwise to the right. And as you can see, when I do this, this angle gets flatter, okay? These up-down strokes is actually relative to my arm. It now becomes a flatter angle. So now when I make these upstrokes like this, I can actually use more of that hinge, that side-to-side motion, because the angle of those strokes is more in line with the lateral motion of my arm, okay? So I think for most people, turning that page this way a little bit is going to help. It's going to give you a little bit of control without, if you go too much, then the problem becomes now these strokes become really easy because they're really like lateral strokes, relatively easy. But moving across the page becomes really difficult because now moving across the page is in this direction that your arm doesn't want to go. I'm kind of locked in here. And now I'd have to be moving the page, repositioning the page a lot as I write. And it really just restricts your ability to make connective strokes to the right. See, actually I can just demonstrate this. If I have, let's say I have a perpendicular angle, neutral angle, feels very free to make these strokes across the page like that. If I turn it to an extreme, angle like this, now it's very open, angle of my arm, angle of the page. Now I have a very restricted movement as I'm going across to the right. And it's very hard for me to, you can see I'm struggling here, to open up the space between each of these letter forms. And that's because I'm moving in this restrictive direction in terms of the geometry of my arm, okay? So you need to find that sweet spot, and it's going to be somewhere in between that perpendicular angle for you and then just somewhat of a clockwise motion, moving that in like this, where it's going to make it a little easier to make these upstrokes without really inhibiting the connective or lateral motion as well, okay? All right, and obviously it's going to depend on the geometry of your arm, of your anatomy. If you have shorter arms, I have long arms, I have long fingers. If you have shorter arms, shorter fingers, it's going to be a different setup might work better for you, depending on how much you're going to need to change the angle of this page. But experiment with it. You might not even have followed along with everything I was saying here, because this is kind of complicated stuff when it gets into the geometry and anatomy of the arm and angles and all this. But really just experiment with the different page ankles. See what works best for you. See how changing the angle maybe helps your penmanship in some areas and hinders it in others. And then you'll be able to figure out what's best for you. And obviously there's other considerations, like if you want to write at a more severe slant, then you might really turn the page this way. So now I'm doing it in the other direction. If this is neutral, now I'm opening it up, going counterclockwise to the left. Now I can write a really slanted hand in that direction, okay? If I want to write more vertical, I might position the page like this. So all these little things you can experiment with. you got to do it yourself to really figure it out, to get it. And this video is just a little intro to give you something to play around with and see what works for you. So thanks for watching. Please subscribe to the channel. Please like the video, leave a comment, and check out writewithyourarm.com. That's where you can see a lot more videos about learning to write with your arm in the tradition of American penmanship. So thanks for watching.